say, in watching many sporting events around the world, players took a knee in remembrance.
Yeah.
So like in the Super Bowl or in various sporting events, how did that make you feel about this case? Seeing sort of this international...
I felt good.
Okay. It felt good. Why?
I've traveled internationally quite a bit the last few years, and I think it's a positive cause. I think there's positive, negative aspects to it. But I think what people are rallying around, it was a positive cause. And if they do it in a positive way, I'm all for that. I think there's so much, last 4 years, last 1 year, so much divisiveness that, when I see people coming together for something positive, something that is progressive or, makes us evaluate potential change, then I think that's positive. So yeah, it makes me feel like we're moving in a good direction versus a divided direction.
Okay. You were asked to, the question, from what you have seen, read, or heard, do you have a general impression of the defendant? And you checked a box that was somewhat negative.
Yep.
And then you were asked the same question about Mr. Floyd.
Yep.
And you checked neutral.
Yep.
And you were asked, why do you feel that way? And you left that part blank.
I didn't. Me too. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's talk about it now. Why do you have a somewhat negative view of Mr. Chauvin?
At the time when I read the question, do you have a somewhat negative view, I kind of racked my brain and thought, well, what do I know? And I knew that a guy had died. I knew he lost his job and he was going to be being put on trial. So I think that gave me a negative view.
Okay.
Somewhat. I mean, I don't really have much other knowledge of him or his past or anything.
Okay.
So.
And ultimately, the question becomes, and it's perfectly okay for people to form an opinion. The question is, can you set aside those opinions and decide this case on the merits and the evidence as presented in court?
Yes.
Okay. And so even if you may have formed a somewhat negative impression, you can start from zero and you will apply the presumption of innocence.
Yes.
Why did you have neutral feelings towards Mr. Floyd?
I think I didn't really know much about the guy. I saw news articles that I didn't really remember at the time. I just knew he was like either a brother or father or something positive, right? That he, but I also heard news articles that maybe he had prior been on drugs or at the time been on drugs, don't know. But I was like, some positive, some negative, pretty neutral. I don't really know anything, nothing concrete that I know a fact or something that I could say very positive or very negative. So I was pretty neutral at the time.
Okay. You were asked if you have ever talked about George Floyd's death with your family, friends, coworkers, or discussed it online, for example, on social media, and you checked the box yes. Did you ever post opinions on social media about the case?
No, I don't think so.
So you were talking about your general discussions, like with your kids, your friends, your coworkers?
Yeah, I don't really even recall talking about it with my kids, but I was working from home at the time, so I didn't really have coworkers to talk to. I think it was just some buddies, it was a news event.
Okay. And what you wrote is you had general discussions about what we saw, the length of time he was subdued, and I heard from someone that George Floyd had drugs in his system, and you wrote, I don't recall expressing any opinion.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of talking about it generally, right?
Yeah, nobody had it. I think at the time we talked about it was very early days, and I don't think anybody knew. Okay. Oh, I heard this, I heard that, but
right. Was there something about the length of time that Mr. Floyd was subdued that troubled you?
No, I don't think it troubled me. I think that was the thing, right, about the video that most people that I heard about, right? So I think, I don't know if it troubled me. The guy died, so I think troubling in general.
Sure.
I don't know how to answer that.
Okay. You were asked whether you believe the community was negatively or positively affected by the protests that have taken place since Mr. Floyd's death. And you wrote both positively and negatively. Positive, a large showing of support for many races coming together. Negative, people took advantage and rioted.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that the people who were protesting are the people who caused the riots?
Do I think the people that were protesting caused the riots?
Or
No.
were participated in or are responsible for the riots?
No.
You can distinguish between a peaceful protest and a riot.
I can. And I don't know the answer. I honestly don't know if there were people that were part of the protesting that got upset and became part of the group that rioted. That seems reasonable that could have happened. But generally, I feel like there was a positive group that were out there to protest and bring awareness to something that they believed in. And people took advantage of it. I don't know what overlap there was.
Okay. There were a couple of questions here that you indicated you had a desire to answer privately.
Okay.
Your Honor, would this be a good time?
I think so. What we're going to do is, under the rules, I can provide that the audio be turned off as far as what's being broadcast.
Okay.
And so I'm going to order at this time that the audio be turned off. so we're back on audio.
All right. So turning to, again, to your questionnaire, sir, there was a page that had several sort of broad statements, and you were asked to kind of rank your opinion about those statements from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Do you remember generally that process?
I do very well.
All right. The first two are, I think, somewhat similar, and I just wanted to ask you about it. The statement is, discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be, and you somewhat disagreed with that. And the second statement is, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you somewhat agreed with that.
Yeah.
Can you just explain what's your thought process between this, why somewhat disagree or somewhat agree with either of those things?
Well, I think the first question was about, is the media overstating kind of discrimination? And I was like, no, I think there is discrimination to some level, and I think they're reporting it somewhat accurately. I don't know the extent of it all, but yeah, I think there's an issue, and I think they're reporting on it.
Okay.
And the second question was?
Blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you somewhat agreed with that.
Yeah. So, in general, I think from what I've seen, right, there's more people of color in jail systems and prison systems, and I think in general there's less income and education in the general populations, and I think with those things come more money, and with more money I think you get better representation, and I don't think it's set up to be exactly even for everybody.
Okay. You were asked, police in my community make me feel safe, and you strongly agreed with that.
Yeah.
You feel police perform a valuable service and keep your community safe?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've led scouting stuff for a long time. We always go to the police station. So I get familiar with them there and what they do and how they think about things and their procedures a little bit, just high level for kids, right? But yeah, I mean, I've never had negative thoughts about it.
Okay. If you had two people who were testifying, and one is a police officer and one is a citizen,
Mm-hmm.
do you automatically ascribe more credibility to the police officer simply by virtue of the fact that he or she is a police officer?
More credibility in general. If it's a topic related to law or law enforcement, for sure. In general, would I just say maybe?
Maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's important that we kind of process through this.
Okay.
Two people are watching some event, right?
Yep.
And one is a police officer and one is not a police officer. It has nothing to do, it's a car accident.
Mm-hmm.
And the police officer says the light was green and the citizen says the light was red. Do you believe the police officer, his or her version, simply by virtue of the fact he's a police officer?
I would tend to.
Tend to? Okay.
Yeah.
And can you maybe we have a moment, Your Honor.
Yeah. We're just going to discuss a little bit.
Okay.
5, I'm actually going to release you from this jury, and so you're off jury service.
Okay.
You don't have to worry about reporting for another case unless you get a summons in the future. All right. Thank you so much for taking the time. All right, we're doing the group advisory, right?
We have another brief time.
Sure. Hey, good morning. Have a seat wherever. Good morning, members of the panel. First of all, can you all hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Oh, we still got one left. Okay. Good morning. Members of the panel, first of all, everybody hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can. Great. If not, we have hearing assistance devices if it becomes a problem for any of you. Well, first of all, my name is Pete Cahill, and I'm one of the judges of the district court. And you have been summoned as potential jurors in this case, which is the state of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, which is a criminal case related to the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. A person charged with a crime has a right to a fair trial before an impartial judge and an impartial jury. In order to make sure the jurors who are selected are impartial, the law provides that the court and the attorneys for the parties may ask questions to all the prospective jurors which must be answered under oath. First of all, thank you for filling out the questionnaire and getting it back to us. It's a lot of good information for us to get started. Your contribution to the important and serious matter at hand is best served by you continuing to provide full and complete answers to the questions that might be asked today. Now, these questions will follow up on issues from the questionnaire and possibly other topics that were not on the questionnaire. After questioning is over, the attorneys will have the right to excuse some of you from service on this jury, and I may excuse others of you for what we call cause. In either case, it does not mean that you are not a fair person, and you should not take offense in being excused. I also ask that you not take any offense at any question that might be asked. We must pry to some extent in order to explore opinions you might hold and to hear about experiences that you have had that might affect your ability to serve in this case. The defendant, Mr. Chauvin, has been charged with murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the second degree. Now, in the normal course of trial, charges may be added or subtracted from these charges, but those are the charges today. To the charges, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a denial of each and every material allegation in the charges. I'm now going to have the participants in the case introduce themselves so you can tell me whether or not you know or recognize any of those people, or know or are acquainted with, I should say. So, for the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Slisher on behalf of the state of Minnesota.
Good morning. My name is Christina Aronakis, and I'm assisting with the prosecution.
Hello, everyone. My name is Keith Ellison. I represent the state of Minnesota.
Good morning. Erin Eldridge for the state of Minnesota.
And Mr. Nelson, if you'd introduce your client and yourself.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eric Nelson, along with my assistant, Amy Voss. We represent the defendant, Mr. Chauvin.
All right, thank you. Anybody on the jury panel who has a relationship, either a friendship, acquaintance, professional or otherwise, with anybody who has just introduced themselves? Okay. And if the answer is going to be yes, please raise your hand. But for now, I want you to also consider whether or not you know anybody else in the Minnesota Attorney General's office. You might see other attorneys who are part of the prosecution team who are not here today. They include Assistant Attorney General Matthew Frank, Aaron is here. Sorry, Ms. Eldridge. Jerry Blackwell, or anybody else who works for the Minnesota Attorney General's office. Anybody recognize or know anybody in that capacity? All right. Now, you have been given a copy. Well, actually, do you recognize anybody in the courtroom as being somebody you have an acquaintance with or a friendship with? Okay. All right. You've been given a copy of a list of potential witnesses, and I'd like you to review it before you are questioned individually. We're going to ask you if you know anyone who's on that list. Now, one of the things the attorneys may not do during jury selection is to instruct you on the law, but I do want you to be aware of some of the basic concepts that apply in all criminal cases, so that you may keep them in mind as you answer the court's and the attorney's questions. So I will instruct you as follows. First, the charges against the defendant are not evidence, and they create no inference of guilt. No member of the jury should permit himself or herself in any way to be prejudiced against the defendant because a charge has been made against him or because he has been placed on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charges made against him, and in order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove his innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial unless and until he has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt according to the law and the evidence submitted at trial. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean a fanciful or capricious doubt, nor does it mean beyond all possibility of doubt. Now, if you serve on this jury, you and your fellow jurors will be the sole judges of whether a witness is to be believed and of the weight to be given their testimony. There are no hard and fast rules to guide you in this respect, but in determining believability and weight of testimony, jurors may take into consideration the witness's interest or lack of interest in the outcome of the case, relationships to the parties, the ability and opportunity to know, remember, and relate the facts, their manner, their age and experience, their frankness and sincerity, or the lack thereof, the reasonableness or the unreasonableness of their testimony in light of all the other evidence in the case, and any other factors that bear on believability and weight. If on this jury, you should rely in the last analysis upon your own experience, good judgment, and common sense. There are things you should not do during jury selection. You are not investigators. You are not to go out to do any looking, and you are not to ask people about this matter. You are not to use the internet to look for information about this case or about the law. Above all, you must not talk to anyone who is involved, the lawyers or the witnesses. Do not be offended if the attorneys, parties, or witnesses do not speak to you. They know that it would be improper to contact you during trial except through the normal jury selection process, and normally will confine themselves to a brief greeting. During the selection process, your family and friends will be curious as to what you're doing. You may tell them that you are on a panel of potential jurors in a criminal case, and that is all you should tell them. Now, since that is all you should tell family and friends, that is all you should tell the general public. So, please, during this selection process and trial, please refrain from using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media to announce that you are a potential juror or to comment on this trial. You may access those social media tools, avoiding media reports that are contained within them, but please do not publish any information about the case or your thoughts about the case. You do not have to stay away from people and refuse to speak to them. Do whatever you wish, but do not talk about the case and do not talk at all to anyone who is involved in it. Now, because of the nature of the charges, this case is receiving media coverage. Do not read about this case in the newspapers or online, or as I said, in social media, and do not listen to news about it on radio or television. This trial, including jury selection, is being televised, but no video of you or any other juror will be taken at any time, now or during trial, if you are selected. Also, your name will not be used in the courtroom. To protect your privacy, you will only be referred to by your random number. The audio of anything you say will be broadcast unless we need to discuss something that is deeply personal, extremely sensitive or embarrassing, or would tend to specifically identify you. In those cases, I will specifically order that the audio not be broadcast. In that case, you'll still have to answer questions on the record, but without audio and, of course, no video broadcast. So, with the exception of juror number 76, who can remain seated, we're going to have you wait in the other courtroom. Given the timing, we may only get through one of you before lunch. We'll see. Could get more. It's hard to tell. In the case that we don't get through until after lunch, we do have some lunches that are ordered extra so that you don't have to go hungry. We'd rather you not leave the floor. But when you're in that other courtroom, feel free to use the sanitizers and the wipes, and please keep all the COVID protections that we have in place, including staying masks and the social distance apart. I generally will be wearing my mask. I only do this for this part since you are far enough away. We have plexiglass around me, and I've had a vaccine shot. But when you are being questioned individually, you will come up to the witness stand here, and I will return to using my mask, if that gives you any assurance. So with that, other than Juror 76, please follow the deputy back to the other courtroom. All right, Juror 76, if you could come on up to the witness chair there. Let's see. All right, you are Juror 76, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you've kind of anticipated something I was going to tell you, which is because I'm wearing a mask, we have plexiglass all around you. The lawyers have plexiglass in front of them. Those are sufficient so that if you want to take off your mask to be more comfortable or to be heard clearly, feel free to do so. If you want to keep the mask on, totally up to you. In either case, I'd ask that you pull up to the microphone so that we can hear you well. Thank you. Before we go any further, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath. If you raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Well, first of all, you filled out a questionnaire, and thank you for doing that. It gives us a lot of information to get started. Are there any, well, first of all, was everything true on the questionnaire that you answered?
Yes, to my opinion.
Okay. Any changes or additions to it that you can think of right now?
No.
Okay. And just to advise you, if there is anything additional or different, it's pretty common. In fact, probably more common than not, because you filled it out months ago. Maybe in reflection you realize, oh, I probably should have said this or that, or something I said was inaccurate, so I need to correct that. Or maybe opinions you held have evolved. In any case, the bottom line is it's okay to say something that's different than what's in your questionnaire. Okay?
Yes.
The attorneys will probably follow up on individual questions, and they will, because it's been a few months, and so far we've had only one juror who actually kept a copy of their questionnaire. They'll probably read the question to you with your answer, just to refresh your memory, okay? Now, part of the questionnaire advised you that you should avoid media about this case, basically. But since you filled out the questionnaire and today, we understand people may have inadvertently been exposed to new information. Like you see a headline or a news blurb and you can't turn off the TV quick enough. Anything like that happen to you that you've learned more information about this case or even related cases or civil matters or pretrial matters or the attorney's parties, anything like that?
No, only the things that come on the news.
Okay. Can you tell me what may have come on the news, that even if it's just what you remember about a headline or a quick blurb that some anchor gives?
The last thing was the settlement.
Okay, tell me about what you remember from the headline.
I mean, normally on stuff like that, Your Honor, I like try to either turn to another channel or...
Yeah, and I think the problem that we've run into with every juror is they take our orders seriously to avoid media, but given how pervasive it is, it's hard to do. And sometimes you will get exposed to it, even with your best efforts.
Right.
Do you think that's happened? And can you remember any of the details? For example, you mentioned settlement.
No, sir. I mean, the only thing I know is like the $27 million. And
Okay.
like I said, when stuff like that comes on, I turn the TV or I go out the room or something like that.
Okay. Have you learned anything about the charges or anything like that since you filled out your questionnaire?
No, sir.
Okay. Let me ask you again about the settlement. That was a civil case between the city of Minneapolis and the family of Mr. Floyd. How do you think that's going to affect your decision in this case?
It shouldn't have any effects on my decision in the case.
Okay. Got to recognize that that's a separate civil issue, different
Yes,
law, different parties. In fact, it won't be in evidence in this case because it's not relevant here.
Yes.
But having heard that, do you think you could put it aside? And this is actually a good example of you heard something, it's not relevant, you're not going to hear it in this courtroom. Can you put it aside and decide this case just on the evidence you hear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that goes for anything you may have seen. And we'll touch a little bit on what you recall seeing on TV earlier. But if you've heard it outside this courtroom, you got to put it aside. And what you saw may have given you certain opinions or thoughts, feelings. You also have to put those aside and just decide the case objectively as a juror, impartially, just on the facts and the law that I give you. Do you think you could do that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, great. Did you recognize any of the witnesses on the list?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, great. We anticipate that the trial is going to be about 4 weeks long once we actually start with opening statements and evidence. And we're going to start on March 29th, so pretty much into April, chewing up most of the time in April. Can you make that work with your schedule, personally, professionally, otherwise?
Well, my birthday is in April.
Okay. What? Well, I don't say the date. I'm violating my own rule, and anything you say might get you a little more identification, and we don't want you to be able to do that. Do you think that'll be all right, though, if you're serving on jury duty on your birthday?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Any other personal distractions that would keep you off jury duty?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, great. Then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nelson to inquire. Mr. Nelson, if you would, Juror 76.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here today, and thank you for taking the time to fill out your questionnaire. I am going to ask you a series of questions, just kind of general questions first, and then we'll kind of focus on some of your answers on the questionnaire, okay? Does that sound okay to you?
Yes, sir.
All right. So let's assume you and I were to meet under different circumstances. We're at a party or some sort of event. What are a couple things I'm going to learn about you during that conversation?
That I'm basically a quiet person and to myself.
Okay. So you kind of stick to yourself, so maybe we wouldn't even meet at a party, huh?
I would speak.
Okay. All right. Do you have any special interests, hobbies, anything like that?
Watching basketball.
Okay. Any particular team you root for?
The Chicago Bulls.
All right. You at some point received this packet of information in the mail, and you learned that you were a prospective juror in this case. You'd heard about this case before you got this information?
Yes.
How did it make you feel when you learned that you were a potential juror here in this case?
I mean, it was like mixed emotions.
Okay, can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, on one hand, it was just something that you didn't want to like be a part or see, or like I don't want to be a part of something like this. And then on the other hand, you do want to be a part of something like this.
Why would you not want to be a part of this? What would be the specific concerns about being a part of this?
Because it's like it's like the weight. Like if someone knows, it's like the weight, guilty or not guilty. I mean, it carries a big weight on you as a person.
Right.
If you made the right decision, if you didn't make the right decision. So, I mean, that's the biggest.
Okay. And why would you? What are the specific reasons that you would want to be on the jury?
Because me as a black man, you see a lot of black people get killed and no one's held accountable for it. And you wonder why or what was the decisions. And so with this, maybe I'll be in the room to know why.
Okay. So, and I'm just going to jump a little bit ahead. You understand that there's two possible outcomes, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And can you foresee yourself entering a not guilty vote?
If the evidence was there and it presented itself as that, yes, I could see myself doing that.
Okay. In your personal life or in your professional life, sir, have you ever been called upon by friends, family members, coworkers to resolve a conflict between two people?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of and I believe, without saying what your verdict was, you had previously been on a jury, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can I ask you how long ago that was?
I want to say in the early 2000s, I want to say.
Okay, fair enough. And I'll ask you some more questions about that when we get to your questionnaire. But in terms of you have a firsthand experience deliberating in a jury room, right?
Yes.
Did conflict between jurors emerge as you discussed the evidence?
I mean, a little, yeah.
Okay. How did you approach that in the jury room? How did you resolve that conflict?
Well, it's like everybody had to sit and listen to everyone, the other person's side, instead of just like over talking everybody. So we had to sit and listen to their point of view and then look at the facts that was in front of us.
Okay. Now, in terms of part of your job in that case was also to assess the credibility of witnesses, right?
Yes.
So whether it be from your experience on the jury or your personal life or your professional life, how do you kind of approach a decision on whether someone is making a decision about whether someone is telling the truth?
Well, I mean, you look them in the eye. Eye contact is the one for me.
Okay. any other tools or anything that you may use? I mean, you've got two people who come to you and they say, this is what happened on Tuesday, and the other person said, that's not what happened on Tuesday, this is what happened. How do you tell which one is telling the truth?
Well, basically you go back to like the little kid stuff, like, when your nieces and your nephews are doing something and one of them is telling the truth and the other one is not telling the truth. The one that tends to move around a lot and can't look you in the eye is the one that's not telling the truth 9 times out of 10.
Okay. All right. In terms of, again, your sort of personal life or your professional life, can you think about a situation, or can you remember a situation where you were 100% convinced you were right and then it later turned out you were wrong?
With my wife.
Me too. How do you deal with that?
I mean, it's like, sometimes you can't rush to judge. You have to sit and you have to look and observe every detail before you can make a decision. Sometimes you jump up and you make a decision because you think that that's right, and then sometimes you're too quick to judge. Then take a look at all of the facts and the information.
Okay, good. Well, let me ask you this: is you, again, from personal experience, you know that at the end of the case, the judge is going to give you the law that applies in this case. Can you apply the law even if you think the law should be different or you disagree with it?
I should be able to apply.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you a few questions about your questionnaire, sir. So, I recognize that this questionnaire was filled out quite some time ago. Not trying to trick you. I'll read you what you wrote. I'll read you the question. Let's just talk about a few of these things, okay? Before I kind of get too far into it, there was a video. There's lots of questions on here about a video or just references to this video. There was a video that was taken by a bystander of the arrest of Mr. Floyd. That video kind of became a viral video online and then became a major news story, both nationally, locally, nationally, and internationally, right? Is that the video that you are kind of talking about when you had, or the video you had in mind as you were watching these or answering these questions?
No, sir. I'm adamantly CNN guy, and I stay away from like social media, Facebook, and stuff like that. So I didn't see anything off of that. Where I got the information from or seeing the video is from CNN.
Okay. So the video you saw, you didn't see an entire long version video. You saw a few clips here and there?
Yes, sir. Just clips from CNN what was seen on local TV.
All right. So you maybe 30 seconds, 45 seconds, a minute, not a longer form version.
No, sir. Like I told the judge earlier, I don't like looking at stuff like that. It's like I'll either turn or I'll walk out the room.
Okay. So the first question that kind of, they ask you to kind of write what you remember about what you heard about this situation, what you may have seen on TV, and you just wrote what I saw on TV.
Right.
Right. So, I mean, can you give me a recitation of what you remember hearing or seeing on TV about this case?
I mean, what I seen was police officers talking to Mr. Floyd, and then later it went to Mr. Floyd being in handcuffs. Then it went from Mr. Floyd wouldn't be in the car to Mr. Chauvin with his knee on his neck. That's what I see.
Okay. And based on what you saw and heard, you formed opinions about Mr. Chauvin as well as Mr. Floyd. Is that fair to say?
I mean, I didn't form an opinion on Mr. Chauvin because I didn't know him, but I just said it's like, it's sad. It's another black man being murdered in police hands. That's all I could say.
Right. And sir, I mean, I've said this to several jurors, right? We are entitled to our opinions,
Yes, sir.
and your opinion is as valuable as my opinion is, right?
Yes, sir.
But ultimately, the question becomes is your ability to be an impartial juror, right?
Right.
And so, I'm not questioning any of your opinions, okay?
Right.
And in the questionnaire, you checked a box that said that you had a very negative opinion of Mr. Chauvin. And like you just said, that a black man was killed by police, right?
Right.
And so, and what you also just used was a term murdered, right? Is that your opinion of what happened? Did Mr. Chauvin murder Mr. Floyd?
I mean, you know, like, and going through doing the questionnaire, it's like you'll get to a point to where it's anger, and then, like I said before, you have to sit and take and evaluate all of the information and put all of that. My opinion doesn't really matter. It's whether if I can do what the judge and what you guys asked me to do.
Okay, good. All right. And you, with respect to Mr. Floyd, you had a more neutral opinion and ultimately wrote that a black man was killed in police hands, right? I mean, again, the question is the law presumes Mr. Chauvin innocent of these charges. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
Do you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
Can you apply that?
Yes, sir.
Will you apply that?
Yes, sir.
You were asked a question. You were asked a question about whether you've ever talked about Mr. Floyd's death with your family, friends, or coworkers, or discussed it online. You said you stay away from online, but you checked the box no, like you've never had a conversation about this case with your wife or anyone else?
I mean, it's like me and my wife. It's like we're two controversial type of people. So I stay away from stuff like that because we'll tend to get into an argument and stuff like that. And then like with my nieces, my nephews, they go with the conspiracy theory stuff, and I don't do that neither. So that's why I stay away from like talking about the case or anything like that.
Right. Did your wife express opinions to you about the case?
Yeah.
Okay. And again, right, I mean, if you're a juror on this case and you reached a not guilty verdict, how do you think would you be able to go back to your wife and explain why?
Yep.
Okay.
I should be able to.
All right. You were asked about the impact on the community after the protests and the rioting and all of that stuff. You would recognize there's a difference between protests and riots, right?
Yes.
And you were asked about whether you thought it was a negative or a positive impact on the community, and you wrote, "I think it has stayed the same." Okay. So have you seen any positive or negative impacts as a result of the quote-unquote aftermath of Mr. Floyd's death?
I mean, you know, like I could say in some ways, yeah, and then in some ways, like, you know, like you could say, like it stayed the same. Because like back when Trayvon Martin had got killed, and it was like the Black Lives Matter came about, and then it was like Black Lives Matter, you know, like every life matter. So then, you know, it's like, and then now it's like people seeing it happen in our city, and then now it's like a lot of white people come, and you know, so like in some ways it's like it stayed the same because it's like everyone noticed it when it happened, when it was fresh, but now that it's not happening, and it's like it's back to the same, you know, the areas, the neighborhood is still the same.
Okay. You were asked a question, and I'll read the question to you, and it says, no matter what you have heard or seen about this case, and no matter what opinions you might have formed, can you put all of that aside and decide this case only on the evidence you receive in court, follow the law, and decide the case in a fair and impartial manner? And your response was, I don't know. Right? And so that's the dilemma, right? We're human, we have our opinions. I have to take what you tell me at face value, sir. I don't know what's in your heart, I don't know what's in your mind, right? And I think that there's a difference between filling out a questionnaire at home and then coming into court and answering. So why don't you know?
I mean, like I said, sir, like in doing that, it was like a lot of emotions. Like, you know, like I said, on one hand, I didn't want to have jury duty, and especially like this type of trial. And then, like I said before, then, you know, it's like, hey, I could be in there and I could make a difference, and I could know why. You know, so it's just like it's a mixed feeling, like, you know, like.
Right, and that's the ultimate question. And we understand people. You're not the first guy to come in here and say, I got mixed emotions about being a part of this, right?
Right.
It's the question of, can you and will you?
Yes, sir. I mean, with my character and who I am, I mean, I think that I can do what's right.
So you believe, without question, that you can set every opinion, all of the information that you have, you can set that aside, and you can judge this case based exclusively on the evidence in court.
Yes, sir.
You were asked a question about whether you or someone close to you has ever been arrested for a crime, and I want to just remind you that we have the ability to cut off the audio and have a private discussion. Are you comfortable answering questions about who it is that was arrested for a crime and some questions about that?
Yes.
Okay. So, who was it that was close to you, or was it you that was arrested for a crime?
I mean, my brother was arrested for a crime.
Okay. And did you talk to your brother about that situation?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And just a reminder, we are still on audio, so let us know if you want to go off at any time. Okay?
Yeah.
Your choice.
Yeah, it's your choice. This is a question. These are some questions we have to ask, and if you don't want us to broadcast it to the world, so to speak, that's your right. Okay. Your brother was arrested, and you had some questions about that, or you had some conversations with him about his arrest?
Yes, sir.
Okay. What were those conversations about? Were they about the police? Were they about the process? Were they about, what were those conversations about?
Why did he do what he did?
Okay. So he did something, it upset you, and you had a conversation about that?
Yes.
Okay. Did he ever express any opinions to you that he was being treated unfairly, either by, again, the police, the prosecutors, the judge, or anybody involved in the system?
No.
Okay. And your brother, did he have to go to court for that issue?
Yes.
And did you attend any court hearings with him?
One.
Okay. And was he ultimately convicted of that offense?
Yes.
And was that after a trial, or was that after a plea of guilty?
It was after a plea of guilty.
And do you understand that people have a right to a trial in this country, right?
Yes.
And would you hold that against, the fact that Mr. Chauvin's not coming in here and pleading guilty? Would you hold that against him?
No.
All right. Now I'm going to ask you some questions. You were asked there was a series of statements about, they're just broad, generalized statements. And you were asked to have your opinion ranked from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And I know you don't remember it, all of these statements, but I just want to follow up on a couple of your answers and ask you to explain them. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
All right. You were asked the question, discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be, and you strongly disagreed with that. Why do you strongly disagree with that proposition?
Because being a black man in America, I experience racism on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. How do you feel that would affect your ability to be a juror in this case?
Not at all.
Okay. You were asked a question, the statement reads, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you strongly agreed with that, right? I mean, it's kind of the same answer, I assume?
Yes.
Because of both your personal experiences, the experiences of your friends and family members as well?
Yes.
And again, you can set all of those personal experiences aside and judge this case based only on the evidence.
Yes.
The question was raised, the Minneapolis police officers are more likely to respond with force when confronting black suspects than with dealing with white suspects. And you strongly agreed with that.
Yes.
Do you have personal experience, or do you have people in your family who have experienced such treatment at the hands of the Minneapolis Police Department?
Well, I mean, I stayed on 3649 Elliott.
Oh, we're gonna, yeah. Sorry, we don't want your address to go out to this is on TV.
Yep, sorry. I stayed right around in the area where this incident happened. And so on numerous occasions, if someone in the area got shot or someone went to jail, I mean, you know, it was known for like the police to ride through the neighborhood when another one bites the dust. And you know, and it's like they antagonized us in the area. And you know, you can go to St. Louis Park or Plymouth, and it's none of the treatment like that with whites. So
okay, so I mean, you've witnessed this in your personal life, right?
Yeah.
You live in the area where this offense is alleged to have occurred, right?
Well, I used to live in that area.
Okay, you used to live in that area, and you can take your personal experiences, put them aside, and judge this case exclusively based on the evidence in this case.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I'm not trying to be glib with you, sir, or, you know, I have to take you at face value. All right. You served some time in the military, I see.
Yes.
You were with the United States Army for a couple years?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for your service. Anything about your personal military service? I mean, did you receive training in hand-to-hand combat and things of that nature while you were in the service?
Yes.
Anything about your military service that you think would somehow impact your ability to be a juror in this case?
No.
So what I mean by that, I guess, to be a little more specific, is you received some training, and you understand the Minneapolis Police Department and their training may be an issue in this case, right?
Yes.
And would you draw upon your own personal training and say, that's not how this should happen?
No, sir.
And you, again, we've talked a little bit earlier about your prior jury service, and I don't want to know the verdict. We can't ask you what the verdict was in that case. But you were a juror in a domestic case, right?
Yes.
All right. And your, did you actually, as you said earlier, you actually deliberated in that case?
Yes.
And the jury ultimately did reach a verdict. Again, I don't want to know what the verdict was.
Yes.
All right. Did you enjoy that experience?
It was interesting.
Okay. What was interesting about your experience?
Well, how the jurors interacted and came to the conclusion that we came to.
Okay. Did you find the court process interesting and the lawyers and the arguments and that stuff too?
Yes, sir.
All right. So I'm almost done, I promise. I'm getting towards the end. You were asked a question about your opinions, or a series of questions about your opinions regarding the justice system in general. And the first question reads, do you believe that the jury system in this country is a fair system? Why or why not? And you wrote, it depends on your color, or it depends on your colors. Can you explain what you meant by that?
Well, I mean, like we said before, I mean, it's like, in my experience, if you're black, I mean, it's like we get we get the things where you have to go to jail. When you're white, I have white friends that do some stuff that they get like a slap on the wrist, and it's like, that's why I said it depends on your color and the justice system.
Okay. So you feel that the justice system, again, as we talked about, is discriminatory towards people of color?
Yes.
Okay. And the second question was, do you believe our criminal justice system works? Why or why not? And your answer was the same, right?
Yeah.
Maybe this is a good reason to fully fund the public defender's office, or, you know, make sure we have good lawyers for everybody, right?
Yes.
Again, I mean, you have these, you are entitled to your opinions, you have personal experiences. Can you just set all of those personal experiences aside?
Yes, sir.
Are you going to hold, you know, those opinions against one side or the other?
I mean, these are my opinions and how I feel about a situation. It's not whether someone's guilty or not. You know, it's like I have to see the information that's in front of me before I can just determine that. And my opinions and how I feel shouldn't be a part of that.
Okay. You were asked a question about what's called sequestration, where you may have to stay in a hotel overnight during deliberations, and you said that you do not need to stay overnight.
No.
Why?
My wife.
So, I mean, you understand that deliberations in this case, a jury, all of the jurors are going to be put in a hotel. You're not going to be able to go home.
No, I didn't know that. I wasn't aware of that.
Okay. At least for that part of the case, and possibly even during the trial itself. Would that cause a hardship for you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why?
Because of my wife.
Does your wife have a some condition or something that, or
She has sciatica.
okay, and so you need to be with her to take care of her?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if jury service and sequestration occurred, would that be an undue hardship for you?
Well, at the time, I wouldn't know. I would have to basically like discuss this more like with my wife more.
Well, I mean, we know sitting here today that if this case goes to the jury to be deliberated, you'll be staying in a hotel.
Okay.
We don't know how long that's going to be.
Right.
It could be a day, it could be 2 days, it could be 3, however long it takes. And your wife has a medical condition. Would that present an undue hardship if all of a sudden you have to be away from your wife for several days?
I mean, it wouldn't be like a hardship where like several days, because it's like someone could come and like be with her. So I mean,
Okay. You were asked a question about whether you would find it difficult to evaluate graphic photographs or video, including photos or video of a person who has died, and you indicated that you were unsure about that.
Yeah, I don't like the sight of blood and stuff like that. So, like, that's why I'm not sure.
Okay. I mean, part of the evidence in this case may include medical photographs of an autopsy. It may include other very graphic images. Would that be problematic for you?
It shouldn't be.
In the last couple of questions here, sir, the question is, do you want to serve as a juror on this case? And you wrote, not sure, and why you answered, because of the tension in the case. Is that the same answers that you provided earlier?
Yes, sir.
Okay. May I have a moment here?
May.
Mr. Nelson, do you wish to exercise a peremptory?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, sir. Thank you for the time that you've taken to answer all these questions. You're very honest and open with us, and we appreciate that. You are excused from this panel, and so and you don't have to worry about other jury service because you're excused from
All right, thank you, sir.
possible other service otherwise.
Yeah,
all right.
thank you.
And so let's make a record while we're. All right, Mr. Nelson, you want to make a record that you did, off the record, make a challenge for cause.
I did, Your Honor. I made a motion for cause, essentially on the basis that this juror made several remarks regarding the Minneapolis Police Department, his experiences with the Minneapolis Police Department, referring to them as murdered, that they had murdered people, that Mr. Floyd was murdered, that he made references to another one biting the dust when he lived in the area, his expressed views about the Minneapolis Police Department, and that those similar behaviors not happening in other neighboring communities. And so I felt that his bias was against the Minneapolis Police Department specifically, and that was the basis of the motion for cause. I recognize that he indicated that he could set that aside. However, in view of the entire context of his testimony as well as his questionnaire, I felt that the cause existed.
Mr. Slisher.
Your Honor, the state opposed and strongly opposed a strike for cause, and I appreciate the court denying that strike. I don't believe that the prospective juror reflecting upon his actual life experience reflected any bias against anyone. He was simply reflecting on reality as he sees and perceives it every single day, as he indicated. And I think it's particularly noteworthy that when he expressed any hesitation about serving on the jury, it was because of the very real prospect that he had embraced, that there could be a guilty verdict or a not guilty verdict, and understanding that that people would be affected by that either way. I think he very strongly and thoughtfully indicated that he could set aside his own personal life experiences and judge the case fairly. I'm disappointed that he was struck. I didn't see a reason to raise a Batson challenge, and I appreciate the court's ruling on the cause.
Yeah, and I can address the latter issue. There was not a Batson challenge made, and I think appropriately withheld because there was a substantial basis for the defense to exercise a peremptory, that being a strong negative view of Minneapolis Police Department in contrast to suburban police departments, which was interesting. It was not just a global, and so Minneapolis being the department that Mr. Chauvin was a member of at some point, his opinions about this is another black man murdered, certainly an honest opinion, widely held by many people, and that by itself would not justify an excuse. What I am relying on is in listening to this juror was when he talked about the response to his jury summons and whether to sit on the jury, and he talked about how, yet this is another black man murdered. But it was interesting that he said he could be fair and impartial, and what he would get out of it is he would have the ability to tell people why, because this time he gets to be in the room, which is, I have certain strong opinions, I can put them aside, and if he had said, I'm going to use those opinions, or even inferred, my inference from what he said was, I can put it aside, and if it is not guilty, I can reach that verdict because I feel comfortable telling people why it happened. And he recognized that on other verdicts that he might have these strong opinions, he wasn't in the room. So he doesn't know why they decided that way, and thus saw this as maybe a chance to tell people why a certain verdict, which would put him right in the middle as far as fair and impartial. I think he was being very introspective about it, that holding these beliefs, but also that these strong beliefs could give, including a very negative opinion of the defendant, could give him a basis or give the defense a basis for an appropriate challenge, but not for cause. So, cause challenge is denied. He will add that as a peremptory. It is 5 to 12, whereas we've had a bit of a morning, and while not a whole lot of court time, we have off the record scrambling to talk about various issues. I'll leave it to you. Want to try one more? We'll only get halfway through probably, or would you prefer to wait? If we wait, I'll probably just kick loose the afternoon people so we don't have to do and let them come back tomorrow morning.
We're prepared to go whatever the court decides.
And actually, the more important person. I've been making the court reporter go more than an hour and a half at this point, so I'm going to rethink even asking the lawyers. I'm going to give a break because I don't want the physical taxing of our court reporter. She is a precious resource. We want to be kind. So let's circle back at 1:15. Hopefully, if the jurors report on time, we can start at 1:15. I think how many? We have 4 left.
Your Honor, before we do that, however,
Right.
could we have that group? There's a juror that we discussed earlier that we were going to have a bench or a chambers conference regarding.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
And I think that before we cut necessarily the afternoon people, if that person is going to be coming in or not.
Understood. Let's do that. Let's hold off on everybody. We will recess for now on the record, go into chambers and figure out how we're going to deal with the next group. Okay? Thank you.